classroom too when I'm talking, and it just comes and booms over the intercom. All right, well, welcome. I'm assuming, because we're all here, that we work in some version of a helping profession, right? And in some way, our professions are all helping professions when you work with people, right? Unless you're working with, or animals or anything, right? So, I feel really, 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 really privileged to be able to be here for a variety of reasons. One, I got to go to India for 2 weeks and study at an ashram. I got to be present with a bunch of people. So briefly, what that experience was like being in college, where everyone is taking the same classes and everyone is listening to the same lectures and everyone is reading the same books, and we're all asking and answering the same question, which is, how do you be the best version of yourself possible? And it was literally just like my best dream of a reality, like, come to life. So as I was there was lots of thoughts, because you're in an ashram with people who choose to live there, right? Some people have been there for 25 years, choosing to live this monastery life. And the question arose for me, like, okay, what do I do with this information when I go home, right? When I go back to my high school English classroom, when I come back to traffic jams and junk email and all of these things that kind of clog our existence. And being a teacher in this world, burnout is a thing, right? We all feel an immense sense of burnout. So one of the things that struck me when I got there was the idea that this philosophy that I was studying was there to help us enjoy our to enjoy our Monday mornings as much as we enjoyed our Friday nights. Right? Isn't that a magical, wonderful thing, to be able to look forward to your Monday mornings or the day after a vacation as much as you look forward to your Friday nights? Like, that just sort of blew my mind, because if you know me, you know I'm about happy hour on Fridays. Okay? You know I'm like, it's Friday, we deserve it, let's go. And that's pretty much how I've been operating, I don't know, forever. So I was fascinated by this idea that you could come to love what it is you're doing, so much so that you don't need that Friday night, right? So, mind blown. Okay, so briefly, I gotta give you a little bit of an overview of what yoga is. So yoga, for those of you that don't know, it means to yoke, to join, right? He makes a lot of connection in the philosophy that religion means to reunite too. So there's a similarity in what we're doing here, although yoga is not a religion, just to clarify. There are 4 ways in this philosophy that we rejoin ourselves. The first way, the most obvious, we do in this room all the time, is considered hatha yoga, the physical practice of restraining and controlling your body. Pranayama, all those things that have to do with how do you control your physical self, okay? The next one is your devotion. So this is how we control the emotions of the mind. This is how we control and work to develop a devotional mindset. That brings us closer in connection with ourselves. The third type of yoga is karma yoga. This is action, and that's what we're going to talk more about tonight. So how do we take our actions in order to get closer to ourselves? Okay. And the last one is jnana yoga, which is what I was doing over in India, which is studying, using your brain to learn, to develop your intellect, and learn how you're going to create that connection. So, can I get a thumbs up because I'm a teacher? Is this tracking for everyone? Okay. Oh, Michelle's here. Oh. Hello, Sheila. I'm glad you're here. Speaking of people who do a lot for our school, she's our school nurse, and so she runs the whole school. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I was really attached to in this philosophy is they said, well, in order to reach enlightenment, right, you have to be karma yoga, which means you develop an idea that you are serving a higher purpose. And I was like, well, duh, like everyone who's in a helping profession, we usually do it not because we get the summers off, although that's an excellent perk, but we do it because we are believing that we're changing the world, right? We are therapists, we are healthcare workers, we are here doing a service because we believe that we are helping already, right? So I was like, check, I got that one, right? But then the question remains, if I'm here in service, why am I so exhausted? Right? Why am I so tired? So I was listening for the answer. And obviously, I'm speaking from a place of experimentation with this philosophy myself. I'm only a week back in the classroom. I'm only a week in applying this in my own life. And so this is hypothesis, conjecture, and a little bit of regurgitation from what I learned, okay? So feel free to experiment with it yourself and figure out what works for you. So the benefit of being in a helping profession is you already are working towards a higher goal. You can already say, I'm doing something here to change the world, right? And that is a beautiful thing. So when I thought about this, I realized that what gets in the way of us enjoying the work that we do are things like disappointment, frustration, and overwhelm, right? These are the things that make us feel like we need that happy hour on the end of a Friday, right? Or whatever your happy hour is. Maybe it's a deep dive into Netflix, okay? Or an Amazon binge, okay? Like, we all have our version of happy hour, right? Mine is a nice margarita, okay? That's mine. So, we are here on a Friday instead, which is great, right? So, when we are looking at things like disappointment, frustration, and overwhelm, the first thing we have to recognize is that these are just emotions. Okay? They're just emotions. And they can sometimes feel so real, right? Like they're taking over our whole being. So one of the parts of the philosophy was learning to strengthen your intellect, your ability to be able to discern what's just an emotional story that I'm telling myself right now, and what is the reality of what's happening. So that's one of the precepts here that we'll return to as we do more philosophy discussions over the next year. But one of the key components that I identified that makes it difficult for educators and other people in helping professions, and I do apologize if I keep talking about teaching, but just know it applies to any helping profession, is that we identify with the profession that we're in as part of our ego. Okay? Like, I am a teacher, right? This is who I am. That's the first thing I tell people about my life, right? So thinking about your job that you do as part of your identity, and I think we've been kind of sold this idea that that is an important thing for us to do, that this identification with what we're doing in the world is who we are. And that's not to say that it's not, okay? I don't want to dismantle you from your whole sense of self-worth here, okay? But what I want us to recognize is that the work we do is different than who we are. And for some of us, me, myself included, that hits kind of hard because I'm a teacher. That's what I do. So separating the me, the my, the I from what I'm doing, okay? And that's important. So let me give you a concrete example, right? In my classroom, I have freshmen. It's super fun all day. But they come in, they're not excited to see me. They don't want to open the book. They don't want to do the reading, right? I can take that really personally. Why don't you like my class? Why don't you want to learn? Why aren't you accepting of what I'm offering? The common denominator in every single one of those questions is what?
You.
Me, right? It's me. And Michelle, this is beautiful that you're here because we had a conversation that echoes this like at the beginning of the school year, which is being able to remove yourself from the center of this equation means that it's not about you. It's about who you're serving, right? It's about the work that you're doing. And when you can take your sense of identification out of who you are and put it into the work that you're doing, no longer does it feel personal when the kids act like kids, when the clients act like clients, right? No longer is it going to be something that you have to personally carry with you home because it's not a reflection of you. They're kids. They're going to do what they're going to do. So that was one part of this, is removing our ego and our attachment to ourselves and attaching it to the work, okay? And that is the hard part. Because when a kid, and I had one, she told me to go fuck myself the other day. Excuse my language. But when you can go, that's you, right? And that's what you're doing here. that's what your role is as a teenager, to push your boundaries, right? It doesn't feel personal for me. She's not saying that's mean, right? So that's the first step. Removing the ego, unattaching from the identity of the role that you're in and going more to the work that you're doing. Okay? And what that does is it just removes the emotion. You no longer have to be disappointed, frustrated, or overwhelmed, right? You can just accept it for what it is, right? Okay, let's see. Part of that is a proper assessment. So anybody who works in a public service will recognize that people come to us with a variety of their own issues, right? And so when they're coming to you, using your intellect to discern what it is they really need, okay? Because that's different than what the institution tells us what they need sometimes, right? Because the system as a whole is designed to function at a massive scale, right? But as us in our individual roles, we're here to interact with people, right? And so sometimes, and this is why I did invite my administrator here tonight, but I was like, she won't like it. I'm going to tell you to ignore the rules sometimes. Whatever the procedure is that you were supposed to do, if it's at odds with what you think that human needs right there, that's where we have to start to discern, right? Now, obviously, we shouldn't be like putting people in harm's way or doing anything that's going to be dangerous. That would be a counterproductive move for what our overarching goal is, right? Our overarching goal is to raise the level of human experience. We do it through education or through service and whatever. So you have to keep that in mind, that we don't want to put anyone in a position where we're not achieving that goal. But keeping it in its proper place and understanding what your role is in that moment. What is your role? What does the work call for? Not you, but what does the work call for? And sometimes the work is to set a boundary. Sometimes the work is to give more time, whatever it is, right? But using your intellect in order to assess what the situation actually means. All right, so that's rule number one that I have to disentangle in my own philosophy in order to avoid burnout, to unlearn burnout. It's not about me. And it's really not about the kids either. It's about the work that we're doing, right? If the job is to do this, that's my job to do that. Okay. All right. And here's another one that I identified as a real problem. Okay. You know how, like, and this is true in teaching, but I'm sure it's true in other professions. That to be a good teacher, you're supposed to be passionate, right? You're supposed to love it. Okay. You can love it. But one of the quotes that just kept resurfacing over and over is to have passion, but not be passionate. To have sentiment, but not be sentimental. So again, this is kind of removing the ego and the identification, right? It is great for me to stand in front of my classroom and tell my students, I'm excited for today. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that, right? But when that student decides to reject what I'm doing that day for whatever reason I got going on, it's not for me to take that personally. My passion, therefore, is still present because I'm not being passionate. I'm using my passion. And another flip of this paradigm is I heard her say, don't lose your temper, use your temper, right? Which means you can still have a moment where you seem like you're mad, but don't be mad. Does that make sense? Use that expression to communicate the idea, but don't let it integrate all the way through your core, right? That's part of the work. Is this student, this person, this client needs me to be this. So I'm going to be this, but then I'm going to go home and I'm not going to be this, right? I don't need to take that home. So when we look at how we can unlearn burnout, I think the two things that I'm going to start with in my own practice is removing the ego. I know it's my name on the door. I know it's my purpose to serve, right? But it's not about me. It's about the work I'm doing. And if I can remove that, then I can see more objectively what's needed, right? I can see what's actually in front of me instead of what I would like to be in front of me. And the last thing I'll say in regards to this is the philosophy said that very much what we do is we get lost in worries of the past, anxieties about the future. How that translates to me as a teacher is a lot of times we tend to ruminate on how things were before COVID, how students used to be, how the system used to function, right? We get caught kind of in this like wah, 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 wah narrative. And then on the flip, we're also told to be data oriented. So we're kind of obsessed about the future. Like, where is it all going? What are we doing in the future? Neither one of those things are true for the moment, right? And it's not to say, and I have really struggled with this over the years, like, how do you not plan and get attached to what you're planning? Because what's the point of teaching if you're not going to be attached to what you're teaching? But it's about keeping the intellectual, like, distance, right, between what's occurring and what we're trying to achieve. So, with that being said, I did want to give a few moments for questions or thoughts or anything that you guys got going on here. Because this is all theory, philosophy, and honestly, in order to really integrate it, we have to put it into practice in real life. So, with that being said, does anyone have any questions? Thoughts? The teacher in me wants to tell you to turn to a friend and talk. Let's do that. Turn to a friend and talk real quick and see if you have any thoughts that are percolating, okay? 30 seconds, go. Wait, help me part of this try out. All right, give yourself like 30 more seconds. All right, we'll come back together. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's go back together. All right, any thoughts? We have 7 minutes together before we open up for yoga. Any thoughts? Any personal sentiments that they want to share? Not be sentimental. Any thoughts that you would think, like we could share here as a shared learning experience?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Just like any, I'm just curious about how your week went. Because, we've had lots of conversations, so I'm wondering, like, how have you noticed a shift or like, and what was like?
I did, actually. My B6 class, I had to totally flip my whole lesson plan because they didn't do anything while I was gone. So we were like, oh, okay, I guess we can't do what I thought we were going to do. And one of my co-teacher came in and he said, "You're still smiling." And I was like, telling them, I'm like, "You're going to sit down, you're going to do this work," but I was still smiling. And I think part of it is because I was like, this isn't me. What they need is for me to readjust. Like, it's not personal. They didn't do that because they don't love me, that they don't respect me, that they don't care about school. They did it because they're teenagers.
Yeah.
And what they need is for me to respond like this. Now, I do know the further I get from India, the less salient this point will be. So remind me of it when you see me in the hallway stomping down and away, or when I'm in Karen's classroom crying again during my prep period. But I think just flattening out experiences, right? And one of the analogies they said was like an actor plays a part on the stage, but he isn't part of it, right? So how can you just kind of zoom out and be like, what does the teacher do? When the student actor does this, what does the teacher actor do, right? How do I respond to the situation if it wasn't me? And I do think it's hard, and I do think sometimes we have to set boundaries on the profession itself, right? Because if there's too many tasks in your prep period for you to do, you set a timer, you break it down. I get 20 minutes to plan, 20 minutes to grade, 20 minutes to answer emails, and that's the time that you get. And I do think that's part of it is not to, because like we feel like if we don't do the job well that we're failing. We feel like we're not doing it, and you're like, but the resource is not available. So assessing what it is, right? Like I think I'm supposed to teach English. Well, they don't come in ready to learn. They don't know how to learn. So my job then is therefore to get them to be interested in learning, not teaching English. That's what I was training for. But now I'm a cognitive coach. So it's been good. At least I have cried 0 times this week. Yes. And I will say I go home a little bit lighter. And I think that's ultimately what this is. And this is where it's so important, right? When we burn out, it manifests as resignation from the job. You're still there, right? You're still doing it, but you don't care. And you have damaging relationships with students. I think, at least in my job, right? If you're burnt out and you freak out on kids, you're ruining their potential for them to enjoy learning forever. So you have to rest your response not on what you want, but on this higher ideal. And the higher ideal is to educate our kids so they have better experiences in life. That's why we're doing it, right? And we can get kind of lost here in our own personal experiences because we're human, And
I think that ripples out.
Outside
of work.
Yeah.
In your community. So.
Well, that was really where my question was. I was like, they mentioned one of the people talked about, he was a therapist there, but he was like, yeah, there's a thing called the combat privilege, which is this idea that I'm entitled to doing something that I shouldn't be doing, that I know that's not healthy for me because I have a hard job.
Wow.
Well, it's this idea like I deserve the margarita because I worked really hard, right? So that's the idea of the combat privilege. But when I have a margarita, am I at the best version for my daughter? Am I at the best version the next day, right? So we do these things that are kind of like kicking ourselves in the butt. Yeah. So how do we cut it off so it's not part of the cycle anymore? That was my hypothesis, is how do we cut it off so that way I can still show up, happy to be there, ready to be objective in my experience with them as much as I possibly can. And that's the goal. At least that's what my goal is right now. Other thoughts, questions? I'm really grateful so many of you came, because ultimately this building, this institution is here to support our community, specifically the people that support the community, right? Like if we can support the supporters, then like I said, it ripples out, right? But when we have teachers burning out in classrooms quietly by themselves, the impact of that would be profound. So if we can bolster and build, and then that ripples out. I know, we're ready for yoga? Yeah, we are. That would be essentially what the objective is. So keeping it on that higher ideal. All right, I'm here for questions if you have any. If you want to stick around and lay around and roll around on your mat, you can also do that too. Love you all. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it
Was it? Well, I
Yeah,
had 30
yeah.
minutes to give you 2 weeks worth of pontification.
It was amazingly perfectly said.
Yeah.
I practiced it a few times.
Good job. No,
And your personality.
you should be a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
What do you think I'm doing in yoga? I'm just making
No,
people
I know,
pretzel in the
like-
process.
Tony Robbins ain't got shit.
Are you staying for yoga?
Yes.
Yes. All right, I'm gonna slide my. I was gonna write things down. I was getting a little lean at this one.
I got this, but I have a part I thought
I
about
can
leaving it, and I
attempt
was
to
like,
hear a
no,
little
I'll be
bit.
okay. I don't want to cause a scene. I have my mat. Do you need help with this stuff, Emily?
No.
So it was enough, though, you know, ending at 3:30. Well, actually, do you want us to scoot forward to
No, I
your
think you're
board?
My people sent me.
No.
Was like when I was on the mountain. And then,
100%. Right. It is. I'm not actually teaching yoga.
Is this okay up here?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hello, Sarah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think sometimes we have permission when we do stuff like this. What do we want to do? But there's all these constructs, right? Yes. And there's like projections on this.
It is,
So it was, I have another journal. I was wondering, like,